The Effective Executive. Chapter 1, Effectiveness Can Be Learned. Page 23 of the ebook. To be effective is the job of the executive. To effect and to execute are, after all, near synonyms. Whether he works in a business or in a hospital, in a government agency or in a labor union, in a university or in the army, the executive is, first of all, expected to get the right things done. And this is simply that he is expected to be effective. Yet men of high effectiveness are conspicuous by their absence in executive jobs. High intelligence is common enough among executives. Imagination is far from rare. The level of knowledge tends to be high. But there seems to be little correlation between a man's effectiveness and his intelligence, his imagination or his knowledge. Brilliant men are often strikingly ineffectual. They fail to realize that the brilliant insight is not by itself achievement. They never have learned that insights become effectiveness only through hard systematic work. Conversely, in every organization there are some highly effective plodders. While others rush around in the frenzy and busyness which very bright people so often confuse with creativity, the plodder puts one foot in front of the other and gets there first, like the tortoise in the old fable. Intelligence, imagination, and knowledge are essential resources, but only effectiveness converts them into results. By themselves, they only set limits to what can be attained. Why we need effective executives. All this should be obvious. But why then has so little attention been paid to effectiveness, in an age in which there are mountains of books and articles on every other aspect of the executive's tasks? One reason for this neglect is that effectiveness is the specific technology of the knowledge worker within an organization. Until recently, there was no more than a handful of these around. For manual work, we need only efficiency, that is, the ability to do things right rather than the ability to get the right things done. The manual worker can always be judged in terms of the quantity and quality of a definable and discrete output, such as a pair of shoes. We have learned how to measure efficiency and how to define quality in manual work during the last 100 years, to the point where we have been able to multiply the output of the individual worker tremendously. Formerly, the manual worker, whether machine operator or front-line soldier, predominated in all organizations. Few people of effectiveness were needed, those at the top who gave the orders that others carried out. They were so small a fraction of the total work population that we could, rightly or wrongly, take their effectiveness for granted. We could depend on the supply of naturals, the few people in any area of human endeavor who somehow know what the rest of us have to learn the hard way. This was true not only of business and the army. It is hard to realize today that government during the American Civil War 100 years ago meant the merest handful of people. Lincoln's Secretary of War had fewer than 50 civilian subordinates, most of them not executives and policy makers but telegraph clerks. The entire Washington establishment of the U.S. government in Theodore Roosevelt's time, around 1900, could be comfortably housed in any one of the government buildings along the Mall today. The hospital of yesterday did not know any of the health service professionals, the X-ray and lab technicians, the dietitians and therapists, the social workers, and so on, of whom it now employs as many as 250 for every 100 patients. Apart from a few nurses, there were only cleaning women, cooks, and maids. The physician was the knowledge worker, with the nurse as his aide. In other words, up to recent times, the major problem of organization was efficiency in the performance of the manual worker who did what he had been told to do. Knowledge workers were not predominant in organization. In fact, only a small fraction of the knowledge workers of earlier days were part of an organization. Most of them worked by themselves as professionals, at best with a clerk. Their effectiveness or lack of effectiveness concerned only themselves and affected only themselves. Today, however, the large knowledge organization is the central reality. Modern society is a society of large organized institutions. In every one of them, including the armed services, the center of gravity has shifted to the knowledge worker, the man who puts to work what he has between his ears rather than the brawn of his muscles or the skill of his hands. Increasingly, the majority of people who have been schooled to use knowledge, theory, and concept rather than physical force or manual skill work in an organization and are effective insofar as they can make a contribution to the organization. Now effectiveness can no longer be taken for granted. Now it can no longer be neglected. Page 23 of the book. The imposing system of measurements and tests which we have developed for manual work, from industrial engineering to quality control, is not applicable to knowledge work. There are few things less pleasing to the Lord, and less productive, than an engineering department that rapidly turns out beautiful blueprints for the wrong product. Working on the right things is what makes knowledge work effective. This is not capable of being measured by any of the yardsticks for manual work. The knowledge worker cannot be supervised closely or in detail. He can only be helped. But he must direct himself, and he must direct himself toward performance and contribution, that is, toward effectiveness. A cartoon in the New Yorker magazine some time ago showed an office on the door of which was the legend, Charles Smith, General Sales Manager, Ajax Soap Company. The walls were bare except for a big sign saying Think. The man in the office had his feet propped up on his desk and was blowing smoke rings at the ceiling. Outside two older men went by, the one saying to the other, "But how can we be sure that Smith thinks soap?" One can indeed never be sure what the knowledge worker thinks, and yet thinking is his specific work, it is his doing. The motivation of the knowledge worker depends on his being effective, on his being able to achieve. If effectiveness is lacking in his work, his commitment to work and to contribution will soon wither, and he will become a time server going through the motions from 9 to 5. The knowledge worker does not produce something that is effective by itself. He does not produce a physical product, a ditch, a pair of shoes, a machine part. He produces knowledge, ideas, information. By themselves these products are useless. Somebody else, another man of knowledge, has to take them as his input and convert them into his output before they have any reality. The greatest wisdom not applied to action and behavior is meaningless data. The knowledge worker, therefore, must do something which a manual worker need not do. He must provide effectiveness. He cannot depend on the utility his output carries with it as does a well-made pair of shoes. The knowledge worker is the one factor of production through which the highly developed societies and economies of today, the United States, Western Europe, Japan, and also increasingly, the Soviet Union, become and remain competitive. This is particularly true of the United States. The only resource in respect to which America can possibly have a competitive advantage is education. American education may leave a good deal to be desired, but it is massive beyond anything poorer societies can afford. For education is the most expensive capital investment we have ever known. A PhD in the natural sciences represents $100,000 to $200,000 of social capital investment. Even the boy who graduates from college without any specific professional competence represents an investment of $50,000 or more. This only a very rich society can afford. Education is the one area, therefore, in which the richest of all societies, the United States, has a genuine advantage, provided it can make the knowledge worker productive. And productivity for the knowledge worker means the ability to get the right things done. It means effectiveness. Page 27 of ebook.